Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Chie the Brat from 1981. And this is continuing my series where I review all of the works of Studio Ghibli, including the works before Studio Ghibli was formed of Isao Takahata and Hayao Miyazaki. Chie the Brat is based on a very popular manga at the time called Jia rin Chie, which I assume means Chie the Brat in Japanese, and this is a film directed by Isao Takahata. This film was actually very popular and critically acclaimed, and actually warranted an anime series that ran from 1981 to 1983, ended up having 64 episodes, and Takahata directed that as well. And this is the first film he's directed since Horus Prince of the Sun, or Hall's Prince of the Sun, or whatever you want to call it. That movie has too many titles. It was the first time he'd really gotten to direct a feature since then, and this is actually the first feature of both Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata that was actually successful, since The Castle of Cagliostro did not actually do well at the time, although it was later. This was their first one that actually did well when it was initially received, and the manga was popular at the time, so maybe you could say it was going to do well regardless, but I think Takahata's direction definitely makes it a really enjoyable film. And I hadn't read the manga, and I thought it was kind of works in this kind of slice of life way to look at kind of a domestic situation. I think it's interesting how Takahata could do kind of more fantasy stuff, but also do kind of downbeat domestic films like this one was. This film has more of a cartoony element than something like My Neighbor the Yamadas, which I think this is obviously a film that you can compare it to. And although Panda Go Panda was very successful, it was a shorts that played with other movies. Sure, it played with the Godzilla movie, which is a big deal in Japan, and it was successful enough to do that and had a good reputation, but I wouldn't compare that to a film that did well theatrically, where people are actually paying money buying tickets for a specific movie. Chie the Brat is actually kind of episodic. Something that I think Takahata is really good at is making an episodic film and not making it feel so kind of haphazard. I feel like doing an episodic film can really lead to disaster and feels more like a messy narrative. It's hard to break from the traditional format of a motion picture, and especially doing something rather episodic just never really works as well. But Takahata, with his television background, I think seems to know how to really get it to flow well. Even in Panda Go Panda, which he directed, I'm surprised that those are two shorts connected, and it kind of worked very well together. It almost feels like he knows what it's like to watch a bunch of these episodes all together and make it flow very well. He's also very good at character development in this film. There's a real connective tissue when you see Chie and her father Tetsu and their relationship together. And Chie runs this restaurant, which is Tetsu's diner, where she serves food herself, even though she's about 10. And her mother and father, who have an arranged marriage, have separated, but she's mostly looked at by her father and her cat and her grandparents. She's a sassy, very wisdom beyond her years kind of girl. She gets into mischief, and Tetsu, who has a gambling problem, gets into a lot of mischief and never knows quite what to do. And the family kind of gets back together in some instances, with the mother, who is living in the town but not really. And then it's kind of hard to describe this film in kind of a more narrative plot-wise because it's so episodic, but all sorts of things happen with gamblers and the Yakuza, and this Yakuza boss who transforms and becomes a more chilled out guy after Chie's cat cuts off the mob boss's cat's ball, and then that cat dies due to a later fight, but they kind of blame the Chie's cat on the death. But I guess when you lose a ball, that was kind of like the beginning of the end in their eyes. This film was originally pitched to Hayao Miyazaki mostly because they liked The Castle of Cagliostro, but he turned it down, and he said that if he had made it, he would change it and make it entirely from the perspective of the cat characters, which I don't know if he was just being kind of a jerk or having a funny way to turn it down, or he was serious. But anyway, they asked Isao Takahata, his good friend. I don't know many animation directors who care as much about family dramas as Takahata does, and seems to work them so well. Even through Grave of the Fireflies and My Neighbor the Yamadas, which I already mentioned, he seems to know how to get family dynamics to work really well, which isn't something you normally expect from kind of a great storyteller. But I think Takahata knows his characters well enough, and obviously, you know, I don't read much about him being a family man or anything like that. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I haven't done enough research on that subject, frankly, but it definitely feels like that's something that's very important from him based on the projects he's decided to go on. And obviously this was a very popular manga, and he was probably very happy to make a film like this at the time, especially since he hadn't gotten to make a theatrical film in so long. But he definitely has a knack for it, and especially the character of Chie. I think he gives her such a quirky, cool presence, and he's very good at balancing the slice of lifeness of the story with a kind of subject matter that you often see a lot of lamer filmmakers do, and you don't see better filmmakers doing kind of more family comedies. The way, as funny as this is and as silly and weird as this is, this film could really fall apart due to its subject matter. He seems to know how to navigate through it a lot better than you'd expect it to. Since it is so episodic, it almost kind of feels like it forgoes narrative, and there's a story towards the end where the family gets back together with the mother that I felt like probably would have been better towards the end, rather than the two cats having this fight over the mob boss's cat's son comes back to fight Chie's cat who took his ball, and have this whole fight. That was kind of an odd ending, but it has this kind of weird episodic kind of stream of consciousness flow to it that I think kind of works, but it gets a little weird and just feels very strange. And I think he gets it to work despite that, and I generally like it, but it does feel a little odd and strange, and because it has such a weird balance to it where it's like slice of life but it's also very cartoony at the same time, that I don't think this is the kind of film that I would recommend for someone who isn't already into Isao Takahata or into Studio Ghibli or into animation in general. It just seems like a very weird kind of Japanese anime comedy, and no one's really sure what its deal is, which I think is kind of something that makes it interesting, but I can understand if people are a little put off by it. I think with something like My Neighbor the Yamadas, you can get that regardless of if you're into that style or not. But in this, I think it's a little more for people who are more experienced anime viewers, really, because it is such a strange, bizarre movie, and the whole thing with the cats is really kind of out there. Although I thought it was kind of quite funny. Takahata really knew the town that this film took place in, which was Osaka. That was another reason Hayao Miyazaki turned it down, actually. Isao Takahata knew Osaka pretty well, and this film is based on kind of the culture in Osaka rather than other areas in Japan. You can tell that Isao Takahata really had a love for this area. You can tell he really knew the area. There seemed to be kind of a flow to the neighborhood and the whole towns. And that's something that goes through both of their works. It's really important to them, the towns they grew up in, the towns that they know, and the towns that are important to the stories that they're making. Both of their films are about protagonists. They're really about the settings that they take place in as well. I think when you look at a lot of great filmmakers, they're definitely products of their culture. You can tell he's really understands what it's like, even in specific towns in Japan, such as Osaka was in this film. And even if you don't know Osaka, you can tell it's definitely taking place in a specific town, in a specific region. I like that about these films because it gives a kind of more of a homey, neighborhoody vibe to it, and especially this film, that you kind of know all the supporting characters, and you get that everyone would know who Tetsu is throughout the town, because you know who the police officer is in the town, you know who the teacher is, and you know who these various cats are, and you do get a sense of what it would be like to live in this fictional, you know, Osaka. The animation is really great. The character designs work very well. The animation has a great flow to it. He's still being a craftsman, which I've noted about both their previous works, that they're more of craftsmen than great storytellers at this time. But I think he's a really good craftsman studio animation director, and you can really tell that throughout this film. But you can also tell he's starting to become more and more of a refined storyteller. You know, he kind of took a little bit of a risk with this, and I'm assuming all these various stories are various issues of the manga or stories in the manga. I'm not really as familiar with it. I think it worked better in My Neighbor the Yamadas because you have a lot of little stories, whereas this, like, one story leads into another, but they don't really have much flow to it. It just seems to feel like these manga issues came out in this order or something, and he felt he should do it that way. Even though the story and the narrative doesn't flow as well as I'd like it to, I still think it's a pretty entertaining little animated film about this girl Chie and her irresponsible father who mostly embarrasses her, but she still loves quite a bit. And it has a softness and a sweetness to it that I generally like, and I think Takahata is pretty good at. If anything, it shows his strength with his characters, and that he can really build these characters in such a way as myself as a viewer can really get through it, even though I'm sitting through these various episodic stories, that he can really build them. So by the end, I care about Chie, and I care about Tetsu, and I care about their cat, and the bizarre cat argument that happens at the end, and then it kind of matters to me. It kind of slowly creeps up on you where you're not exactly sure what this film is doing with its episodic nature and everything, but I think it definitely overall works in the long run, but I think it's kind of a messy journey to go on. So if you've seen Chie the Brat and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. So the next film in my Studio Ghibli series will be Chie the Cellist, and that is also from Isao Takahata, and that will be in 2 weeks. And I hope to see you then, and thank you for watching.